Hello, welcome to the New Stack Makers, a podcast where we talk about at-scale application development, deployment, and management. This episode of the New Stack Makers is sponsored by KubeCon CloudNativeCon. KubeCon CloudNativeCon conferences gather adopters and technologists to further the education and advancement of cloud-native computing. The vendor-neutral events feature domain experts and key maintainers behind popular projects such as Kubernetes, Prometheus, gRPC, Envoy, and more. The KubeCon Seattle event is coming right up, December 10th through 13th. It is sold out. You can still get on the waiting list. Registration will open soon for their 2019 events. Be sure to register early for KubeCon Barcelona, May 20th through 23rd. KubeCon Shanghai, June 24th through 26th, and KubeCon San Diego, November 18th through 21. Hope to see you there. Hey, it's Alex Williams, the New Stack, and I'm here at KubeCon CloudNativeCon in China, and we're in Shanghai, and I'm here with Julie Han, co-founder and chief operating officer of Caicloud, and Zhang, CEO of Caicloud. Nice to have you here.
Hey, thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting us.
Great. So, tell us about the company. I'd like to hear a little bit about Caicloud. What is Caicloud for people who may not be familiar with it?
Sure, I can go first. So Caicloud was founded by a bunch of ex-Googlers and alumni from Carnegie Mellon. Our goal is to build an operating system, but it's very different from Microsoft or like Apple because we're not competing with them. They're like already giants. But we are building a OS in the AI age. For example, in the PC age, we have Windows, we have Mac OS, and in the mobile age, we have like Android, we have iOS as well. But now I can see every business is data-driven, and machine learning and artificial intelligence are really surging. But we need to have an operating system to empower every organization to utilize their data, to make sense of the data more efficiently. And that is the operating system we're building. All right.
So tell me then about the traditional operating system that we know of, and what was it originally managed for? It was really managed for applications on a hard drive, correct?
That's right.
And when the cloud services arrived, we saw the lesser influence of an operating system.
Exactly.
We did see enterprises still trying to use Red Hat Enterprise Linux, for example, or Windows. So what are the drawbacks of those types of operating systems for these new workloads?
Right. I can see two major distinctions between the operating system for the AI age versus for the PC age or for the mobile age. So the first one is more and more computing is offloaded or shifted from the local device or server up to the cloud. And more importantly, it's shifting from on a single server to a set of servers. By a set, I mean like tens of thousands or even millions of servers. So this is a very big difference. So the other one is in the AI age, the model-centric software is quite different from the traditional like Java or Ruby applications. Because for those regular software, it's basically just two-dimensional complexity. You design the algorithm, you implement it, but for the data-driven or the model-centric software, it's really four-dimensional. Besides this algorithm implementation, you also need to have a model selection related, also the parameters related with it, as well as data. So the complexity is much more, and the workflow is totally different. So we're building a OS geared toward this new type of workloads to make it more distributed, to make it more with more parallelism, and also to change the workflow to keep data in mind, to keep model in mind. So I think these are the key differences, between these two.
So Julie, you had a keynote today.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be tomorrow.
It's tomorrow. You have a keynote tomorrow.
Right, tomorrow morning.
And so will you be discussing this operating system in context with Kubernetes, and what is that bridge?
Yeah, we will basically talk about how we take advantage of Kubernetes and a newer project called Kubeflow to help the State Grid, the largest energy company in China, to deal with their different needs and situations in their enterprise daily business.
Okay, and so now we're talking about these different operating systems and how the operating system for the AI age is really almost about inputs and outputs, isn't it? With the algorithmic kind of approach that we see increasingly being taken. How does Kubernetes fit with that new model?
All right, so maybe I can go first. By its naming, right, Kubeflow, the cube is from Kubernetes. The core reason why AI needs help from Kubernetes or cloud native in a broader sense is because when we are talking about AI, people tend to only focus on the algorithm part. What algorithm to use, what neural network architecture to use. But in fact, when we wanted to deploy AI in production, there are a lot of other aspects. For example, how to manage the devices, the GPUs, the servers to speed up the model training, and also how to make more efficient data storage, how to manage more like access control, and also how to make the model release or rollout a more pleasant experience. And all these aspects are actually in Kubernetes domain because cloud native is aimed to accelerate the software development cycle and also to leverage its parallel computing to speed up the model development and training, right? And like I said before, software is no longer restricted to Java or Ruby application. It is also including machine learning, artificial intelligence like TensorFlow. So from this sense, we use containers or Kubernetes to accelerate the AI workflow, the development cycle, and also make it much easier to go to production.
Julie, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, because I'm going to talk about the context and the challenge the State Grid is facing these days. For example, they have a different situation of business. For example, they have the equipment, computer vision equipment to monitor the use of the electricity of the user so they can see whether there's any like peak or the downside of the usage of the electricity. So when we have this big, huge amount of data, we can probably drive more clues out of this. And all this we're taking into consideration of the huge amount of data all over China under this umbrella. So that's why we probably need a stronger, like Zhang just said, the kind of OS to take care of this kind of new challenge.
So tell me then about how computer vision is used and how Kubeflow correlates.
Computer vision devices you can see as the like hardware equipment. We have like the cameras, the videos. We have this kind of monitor devices in certain scenes. Over the scene, and then the Kubeflow you can take it as the kind of engine running underneath, or this kind of working flow.
What is Kubeflow doing underneath then? What is it doing for you underneath?
Okay, so maybe we can take an example, the whole workflow. So once we have all this data, these video, these images, we first need to have a place to store them, and they may be enormous, right? So we need to first leverage Kubeflow or Kubernetes to build a infinite storage store to efficiently manage and record all these data.
So how does that work? How does that infinite store work? I mean, it's state, right? You're thinking about state here and how you manage that state.
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly. So that's one type of state, and we are not starting from scratch. We borrow ideas from the big data community, like leveraging like HDFS, or from the file system community, like Ceph or GlusterFS, to efficiently manage this data. But we use containers on top to do all the index indexing, to do the high availability, and to do the API layer to make the data readily accessible. So after this step, we use Kubeflow or our product on top to enable different engineers to label the data efficiently. Because even for today, I think supervised learning is still like dominating the AI world. But for the supervised learning, we do need to label our training set. So we use Kubeflow to enable an online service where multiple people can label a subset of the whole data set efficiently and collaboratively. And after that, it comes to model selection. Even though like computer vision is a kind of established area of AI, but we still have a lot of like networks to select from, right? We have ResNet, we have Inception, different versions, and we leverage Kubeflow and Kubernetes to enable simultaneous model training and automated model evaluation and comparison, so that we don't have to rely on domain knowledge, but instead we can leverage the computing power to have multiple models to be evaluated at the same time, right? And after the model is done, we select the best one. We again leverage the DevOps feature from containers to make it automatically like roll it out to production as an API. So that's kind of anatomy of the whole process.
So when you are how are you monitoring that environment? Because that becomes one of the great challenges, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's true, and that's why we need Kubeflow besides Kubernetes, right? Kubernetes or the cloud native already contains an ecosystem that has some monitoring components like Prometheus, but when it comes to AI, it oftentimes use specialized devices like GPUs, and the workloads also look different from the Java application. So Kubeflow is geared toward this specialized device and software, and Kubeflow contains specialized like GPU scheduling, GPU monitoring, and also model training monitoring to see how the learning rate, how the ROC curve, or how the matrix confusion matrix looks like. So these are built into the Kubeflow project.
And so when you get to that labeling part of the work, tell me a little bit about that and how you do the labeling kind of with this container infrastructure.
Right. Before we have this new operating system or platform, we saw engineers or data scientists use a really traditional way to do the data labeling. For example, they have a local copy of the whole data set, and each one manually label a subset of it, and then different like engineers will then manually upload their labeled data sets together to make the manual aggregation. But the way we're doing that is to use Kubernetes to make it an online service, so that different users can use an online API to label the data. The data are stored by Kubernetes, and also we leverage the access control from Kubernetes to make sure that each person can only access its own subset of data, so that it won't mess up with others' data sets. So these are how Kubernetes can help underneath.
So Julia, how do you believe that this is going to impact other industries in manufacturing, for example?
Because according to the clients Caicloud has been dealing with in the recent 2 years, for example, State Grid is one of the example in the energy industry, but then we have very similar cases, for example, from other industries, including like e-commerce, like Suning, which is doing the Double 11, like online merchants commodity sales. They have a very similar type of like infrastructure kind of workflow needs. So we are also taking advantage of the Kubernetes and the Kubeflow to help them in e-commerce business too. Regarding other like industries, we also have like financial area, for example, the UnionPay, which is the largest like central, I shouldn't say controlled, but it's like centralized banking institutes, the largest one in China. They're also having under the pressure of the digital digital transformation, which means they have huge amount of data and need quick, very fast, like second level processing needs of their business. Very similar situation. So that's from the financial business. So we're dealing with looking at all these like our clients from various industries in China in a very similar situation here. Yeah.
What are the impacts of what of this, and perhaps we can also talk about how the Caicloud operating system works in these environments. I'd like to get an idea of what have been the results, and then perhaps then we can talk about the OS and the role it plays in these environments.
Okay. So I'll start with the bigger trend and then give a very concrete example. The bigger trend, I think, the Chinese market today is very unique and it evolves really fast. And from some sense, I think the digital transformation goes even faster in China than the rest of the world. For example, today we have mobile payments everywhere. I can't even remember the last time I used my wallet or credit cards. Like we have the Alipay from the Ant Finance. We have a WeChat from Tencent. So given all these new business situations, traditional business are facing like a do or die situation for their digital transformation. So this is a bigger trend in China. So what we are empowering them is to enable them to do faster transformation from offline business model to online. One of the concrete example is VIP.com, so which is the third largest e-commerce site in China. So VIP.com is expanding its business globally because of the domestic competition. But the problem is whenever it goes to a new country, it's not only their websites or their mobile app needs to be like up to life, but also the underlying 18 different models have to be retrained, right? Because for each country, the data source is different, the skill is different, and the culture is different. So everything is different. But then, before we used our operating system to empower them, they have to manually, there are hundreds of GPUs to allocate them among their 18 different model developments. And for each model, the data is huge. The neural network is very deep. It takes weeks to train just one single model, not mentioning to roll it out.
And that's where the labeling starts to play a major role.
Yeah, exactly. So after using our operating system, we basically automate a lot of their process, and we speed up a lot of process as well. For example, now for the model training, we can spread the workload across multiple machines, multiple GPUs. And when the new data arrives, we can use our a continuous integration to automatically update their model, to retrain it and release it. So as a result, we basically shrink their time from 2 months to have their system up to life down to just a week. So that's a very, very concrete example how we help enterprises to catch the digital transformation in a very timely manner.
So tell me a little bit more then about the technology architecture behind the Caicloud OS.
Okay. So I think a AI OS really includes 5 components. The first one is resource management. How to manage the computing like CPU, GPU, the memory, the network. And the second component is data management. How to store and manage the different data sets as well as labeling them. And then it comes to process management. How to manage the AI from training to serving process, for example, leveraging the model maturity model. And the third part is model management. So once we have the model, how can we do the version control, right? How can we use a representational model to make the storage more efficient? And finally, we need to have a UI management to provide the a graphical, a Windows interface to the users to lower the usage barrier. So these are the 5 components underneath it. And we're using Kubernetes at the top, using Kubeflow at the core, and then having our plumbing components to implement the 5 components.
Where is Caicloud running?
Oh, I see. So again, so in China it's very unique. I remember in the US, I think the number may not be accurate, but about 80% of enterprises are using public cloud. But in China, the number is inverse. is like 20%. So most of our product stack is still running on-prem. But we are seeing a trend of hybrid cloud is really surging in China. So we are also running Caicloud today on Microsoft Azure, on Alibaba Cloud, on Huawei Cloud. And these are the 3 cloud providers we're using today.
Yeah, let me put in some other numbers because I also work as the CNCF ambassador and leads the Chinese Kubernetes community here. So we have done some surveys over 2017 and 2018, and through the data comparison between these 2 years, we saw a growth in the public cloud percentage in the enterprise usage. For example, in 2017, it's more like 1/4 for example, for VMware, OpenStack, public cloud, and bare metal. It's like each part takes 1/4 of the whole percentage. But then when we march over to 2018, we saw a very obvious growth in the using of the private cloud, which means the enterprises are being more open towards the different types of the cloud service in China here. Yeah, so which goes back to what Shane just explained about the multi-cloud trend in China in these 2 years. Yeah.
So in the keynote this morning that Dan Kahn gave, he showed the certified providers of Kubernetes. He showed the number of certified providers that are in China. He talked about the end customers that are overall, around the world, and then the percentage of them that are from China. And the end users numbers was 2. So what do you think that number is going to be next year?
It's kind of hard to guess, but I would say like it's going to be more like multiple diversity in the future, for the trends.
Yeah, my wild guess is I think it's going to surpass the rest of the world. So my rationale is, again, I think the digital transformation in China is going faster than the rest of the world. Another concrete example is Starbucks. So Starbucks China is our customer as well, but what they are going to achieve is the so-called O2O delivery. So what O2O means? O2O is a very like a Chinese business model. It means online to offline. So it's combining the offline experience with online efficiency. So this business model is very unique in the Starbucks Chinese market, but not in the rest of the world. So after we have built this unique solution for this scenario, I actually talked to the Microsoft CEO, Satya Nadella, a week ago, and he was very thrilled about this scenario, and he wanted to basically make this solution widely available to the rest of the world. So from this sense, I think more Chinese enterprises will embrace the new container and Kubeflow technologies faster, but now they're just being shy.
And that speaks then to almost the inverse question is what impact will China's technology development in Kubernetes, in these new AI models, have on the rest of the world?
Yeah, so I think there are really a lot of good things going on because we have the most complex scenarios, we have the most advanced market requests, and that actually pushed a lot of technology advances here. But one barrier, I think, is a cultural and a language barrier that prevented a lot of Chinese innovation or end users to go to the bigger world. But I think the conferences like this will definitely help with removing this barrier to make the Chinese technology community more open to the world.
Wonderful. Now, Julie, you're an ambassador, and how do you see the community developing in China?
Yeah, this goes back to 3 years ago, back to the second half of 2015, when we just went back to Hangzhou to found our company. And I remember exactly how it went. The government, the media came to us, and the first batch of questions is like, what is Kubernetes? What is container? People knew very, very little about this new technology, new wording concepts. So that was the point we started to do the kind of community thing to spread the knowledge, to spread a new trend, a tech trend in what was happening at the time in other parts of the world to let people know here. Yeah, so that's the kind of education of the market at the time that we did. Yeah, but I think it's an ongoing kind of process we need to continue to do. But also like a year ago, I remember, actually 2 years ago, when I went to Seattle KubeCon, that was the first time when I met DanCon. And I asked him, like, do you know what is the biggest example of the Kubernetes usage in China? He had no idea about it. He only knew there was like eBay using Kubernetes at the time. So I told him we have like JDOS, which they're using 2,000 of nodes at a time, which is really, really large scale considering Kubernetes at a time. So that time he was really shocked and interested to know, oh, this was the kind of example that Chinese enterprises are taking advantage of Kubernetes. So I had a lot of conversation with him since then on. And just like Xing said, we really need to remove this kind of barrier of communication to make the flow really work here. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is my first time to China, and and so
How do you like it?
I'm really enjoying it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I really am, and it's. I think if as someone who's covered this space for many years as a journalist, and we find our focus is on at-scale development, deployment, and management. So this is really exciting for us because a big trend for us in 2019 is looking at how container technologies will continue to develop and become used more predominantly in environments like, for example, that Caicloud is using. So we find it, very, very enriching. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk. I really appreciate it, and it's really fascinating.
Yeah, it's my great pleasure.
And I really want to learn more about your company and your progress, and we look forward to many returns back to China.
Sure, coming back more often.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. Thank you.
This episode of the New Stack Makers is sponsored by KubeCon plus CloudNativeCon. KubeCon plus CloudNativeCon conferences gather adopters and technologists to further the education and advancement of cloud-native computing. The vendor-neutral events feature domain experts and key maintainers behind popular projects such as Kubernetes, Prometheus, gRPC, Envoy, and more. The KubeCon Seattle event is coming right up, December 10th through 13th. It is sold out. You can still get on the waiting list. Registration will open soon for their 2019 events. Be sure to register early for KubeCon Barcelona, May 20th through 23rd, KubeCon Shanghai, June 24th through 26th, and KubeCon San Diego, November 18th through 21. Hope to see you there. Listen to more episodes of the New Stack Makers at thenewstack.io/podcast. Please rate and review us on iTunes, like us on YouTube, and follow us on SoundCloud. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.